What's good, everybody? It's Christian, and you're back on Fed by Fire. And tonight, we're walking straight through the spectrum of what the feds are dealing with in this country, from pills and tractor trailers to protests turning into felonies, to one of the darkest cases you'll probably hear about all year. And this isn't just headlines and mugshots, this is how choices stack up into life sentences and how fast I got it under control turns into I'm never going home again. If you're new here, this show is simple. I used to live on the other side of these stories: addiction, theft, fraud, shoplifting, anything you can think of, trafficking, the whole fast money, slow consequences lifestyle. It ended up the way it always does, with cops, courts, rehabs, and a whole lot of pain. Now I break these federal press releases down so you don't have to, and learn the hard way like I did and what's going on all around the country. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a cop. I'm just a dude who's seen both sides and trying to keep you and your people from getting roasted by the same fire that almost took me out. You know what I'm saying? All right, case one, the multi-state fentanyl machine. We're talking about Martinez and Salazar Amaya. They were a network. Let's start in the Southwest, where the feds just scored in the first trial win in a monster Fetty case they've been building for years. Alex Anthony Martinez, 38 years old, got convicted by a federal jury for his role in a multi-state fentanyl trafficking organization tied to a bigger network led by a guy named Herberto Salazar Amaya. We're talking about an operation that the DEA calls the largest single fentanyl pill seizure in its history. Millions of pills pulled out of one pipeline and raids all across multiple states. And the whole ladder of defendants, from bosses down to regional managers. Martinez wasn't the top dog, but he wasn't on the corner either. He was somewhere in the middle. That's what court documents describe him, as a regional manager. He directed and supplied local distributions in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and Hobbs from mid 2024 into 2025. And that's the thing people miss. Once you're managing other people, cars, stash houses, and routes, you're not just in possession anymore. You're in a conspiracy land. Every text, every run, every stash spot becomes part of a bigger map that the feds are drawing investigators to hit things from all these angles, from DEA, local task force, IRS, criminal investigations, and so on. The machine, they didn't just grab Martinez, they targeted another regional player named Bruce Cedillo and a big Hobbs. Our dealers named Jose, and a search warrant at the stash house in Northwest Albuquerque turned up around 150,000 pills, cash, and guns, enough to bury multiple people in federal time. Y'all know that. Cedillo gets taken down, and instead of reading the room and stepping back, Martinez steps up, and the prosecutors say he tried to keep the operation alive and even expand it, including trying to push dope into a correctional facility in Cibola County. You know how wild that is, really? When the feds are already on you and the network is hard, your next business is let's take shit into prison. Now you go from maybe beating the case to wondering why you have a death wish. But May 2nd, 2025, the hammer drops, and Martinez is in coordination with for a multi-state operation tied to a historic pill seizure. In July, a second superseding indictment comes down on him and 15 co-defendants on drug trafficking, firearms charges, and violations of his pretrial release from a separate felon possession case. At trial, the jury didn't hesitate long. After about 8 hours of deliberation, they found him guilty of conspiracy and possession with intent to distribute fentanyl, and the judge ordered him locked up until sentencing. On paper, he's staring at life. You know, you can look at this case from two ways. From the street side, it's a big operation, big money, everybody's eating. Or from the reality side, it's more of an example of the feds tracking a whole ecosystem, letting it play out, then scooping everybody up. That's what they do best. from the top to the middle. If you're still in that world, understand the more organized you are, the more it looks exactly what they think it is. And you become targets for task forces and all other kind of things. And you think, I was just helping people, but you're management, and management gets management time. Now, let's jump from that massive pill machine to a highway in South Carolina, where two brothers thought they just were another truck in traffic until they ended up with the biggest fentanyl seizure in the state's history, in the state has ever seen, and they stamped their names on their bricks. How genius. All right. In South Carolina, a trailer in Rio's land in Columbia, South Carolina, investigators say federal, state, and local agencies linked up and pulled 156 pounds of fentanyl and 44 pounds of meth out of a tractor trailer. They believe it's the largest seizure in the state's history. And here's how it went. We're going to break it down. On July 1st, DEA agents in Lexington County and deputies, state transport police teamed up to coordinate two traffic stops in Lexington and Richland counties. The truck both had legitimate goods in it, real products, real paperwork, but hidden there were big packages of narcotics. They believed the load was sourced in Mexico, crossed the southern border, and was pushing through the southeast like just another shipment on the grid. Now, the fentanyl math is crazy. A rough guidelines about 2 milligrams can be lethal, but a kilo has the potential to kill thousands of people. So when they tell you 71 kilos, 156 pounds of this stuff was in the truck, that's enough to potentially kill, wipe out a population of whole cities. This release puts that could kill X million people number on it and drive it to the point where street value they estimated about 1.7 million, and that's the part that corrupts people. Seeing the money and forgetting that every bag is attached to funerals. The two brothers driving the truck, Alberto and Chris Guadalupe, they're from Rio's land, both from California. They got indicted on conspiracy and possession with intent to distribute fentanyl and meth. The maximum penalty will be up to life in federal prison, but this is how fast your charges in one traffic stop, one hidden compartment. You go from I'm just driving to I'm a key part of a multi-state trafficking conspiracy. Officials in that case called it a life-saving intervention, not just a bust. That's what the narrative is now. Law enforcement is framing these big drug cases as public health saves. But whatever you think about the politics, the reality is simple. Loads this size feed addictions, relapses, and caskets. So when you're the one riding with it, you're not just moving product. The feds are going to say you were riding with potential mass death in the back, and that's just what it is. And we've talked about drugs and big numbers. Now let's swing into something people think is on the activist side of the spectrum, a protest, because you're out there in the streets with emotions, high anger, maybe even for a cause that feels righteous. One bad move can still turn into a federal defendant real quick. Let's talk about case three, the ICE arson protest in Portland. A man named Barker in Portland, Oregon, 34-year-old Trenton Edward Barker just pled guilty to arson of a federal building for what started as a protest action at an immigration and customs enforcement facility. Here's what the feds say happened on June 11th, 2025. A group of people started stacking big objects and debris against the vehicle and the gate at the ICE building in South Portland, basically building a barricade to keep law enforcement from driving in and out. In the middle of that, Barker pulls a flare from his backpack, lights it, and throws it onto the pile of debris and catches it on fire. So now you're not just talking about a protest, you're talking about a fire and a federal facility. Months later, on October 22nd, He gets formally charged in federal court with arson of a federal building. That's not going to be just a slap on a wrist or disorderly. That one in court carries up to 20 years in prison, a heavy fine, and of course, supervised release. When and if you get out. Barker took the plea. His sentencing is set for March 4th, 2026. This case was worked out by the FBI, the ATF, and local Portland police. That's another thing people miss. The moment federal property is involved, ICE, a courthouse, a federal office, the cast of characters investigating you changes. It's not just city cops and a night in jail. You're on the radar of agencies that live and breathe long-term prosecutions. And it doesn't matter if you say I was just part of the group or I only lit one flare in a big protest. Behind the scenes, behind the lines, a felony's there. You don't have to agree with the politics or ICE or the government to understand the game. Once you cross into fire and property damage, especially at federal sites, you have stepped into a completely different legal world. That one moment of emotion can cost you decades. But we've seen the supply side of the drug crisis, seen what happens, when anger in the system turns into a federal arson charge. Now we're going all the way into the worst part of humanity. The kind of case that, makes cops, judges, and even prison lifers shake their heads. If you're sensitive to crimes involving kids, this is the part where, you might want to pause. I'm not going too graphic, but the facts themselves are very heavy and very emotional. In New Orleans, a federal court uh would adjourn Daniel Michael Callahan and Louisiana for two life sentences, one for kidnapping resulting in death and transporting a minor across state lines for criminals and sexual activity. Those federal life terms are stacked on top of the life sentences he already picked up in Louisiana and Mississippi. This man is never coming home and he shouldn't. According to the case file on June 12th, 2024, Callahan was inside the home of an adult woman in Loranger, Louisiana. She lived there with her two young daughters. While in that house, he stabbed her repeatedly over and over until she died. After killing her, he took her car and kidnapped both her little girls, driving them out of state to Mississippi. He brought them back through Louisiana, scooped up a co-conspirator, and ended up at a property in Jackson, Mississippi. There, over the night of June 12th into early June 13th, he and a co-conspirator sexually abused one of the children. Then, on June 13th, while still at the same property, Callahan suffocated the younger child, pressing her against the chest until she died. Later that day, once the mother's body was found back in Louisiana, federal, state, and local law enforcement launched a manhunt. They tracked him and the car to that Jackson property where they found a pit on the grounds. Inside of that pit, they discovered the murdered child and the surviving child together. The surviving child lived through something, no kid should ever have seen. Once arrested and read his rights, Callahan talked. He admitted to killing the mother and kidnapping both the girls, taking them across state lines, abusing one and killing the other. His co-conspirator also gave a statement backing up the abuse. This case hit multiple systems at once, sheriff's offices, state investigators, FBI, U.S. Marshals, local police in other states, everybody coming together to find those kids and lock him down in federal court. He pled guilty to those two counts. The judge gave him life on each count, which he fucking deserved, back to back, and ordered, the time to run consecutive to the state life sentences he already had from Louisiana and Mississippi. The court also ordered him more than $250,000 in restitution to the victim's family. Even then, money doesn't fix anything here. It just acknowledged that the wreckage, this case was pulled under Project Safe Childhood and DOJ incentives focused on child exploitation and abuse. They used that framework to line up resources for federal, state, and local to go after people who target kids in a world where the internet spreads predators into every corner. Cases like this are exactly what their program exists for. When you hear something dark, it's easy to label the guy as a monster and move on. And yeah, this is evil on a level the streets don't excuse, but the reason it matters to cover it up in show like this, it shows why some federal tools exist, the harshest laws, the harshest sentences, the multi-state cooperation. It shows how law enforcement will absolutely go to the wall when kids are involved. There's no maybe here. Once those Amber Alerts go out and that car crosses a border, the whole system wakes up for the surviving child and the family. No sentence brings real closure. They still have to live with what happened. They don't have to keep walking into courtrooms wondering if this man might ever get back out again. The law can't heal what he did, but he can make sure every breath of his life, he's behind bars. So, what did we walk through tonight? A multi state fentanyl empire where a regional manager tried to ride the line between boss and ghost and now faces life. A tractor trailer in South Carolina with enough poison in the back to end whole cities. Driving by two brothers who probably thought, it was just another run, and a protest in Portland where one flare turned into a political monument into a 20-year federal arson case. And finally, a case so evil, the system hit a man with life on top of life on top of life just to make sure he never tastes freedom again. And if there's a thread through all this, it's that consequences don't care what your story is or what you're telling yourself. I'm just moving weight. I'm not hurting anybody. I'm just helping with this load. It's not mine. I'm just making a statement the system needs to hear. Or in Callahan's case, that sick delusional mindset that tried to turn children into property. The system sees all these actions, not excuses. Yes, the system is flawed, political, sometimes unfair, but at the end of the day, handcuffs, trials, and sentences are real. Addiction is real. Grief is real. I say all this because I'm somebody who lived on the wrong side of it all, and every time you pick up that phone, get in that car, co-sign to that plan, or ignore that voice in your head saying, this is too far, you're making a choice, and the feds are patient. They will let you stack choices until they can drop a case so big your name is on a press release and your future is a DOC number. If you're still in the life or you're halfway out, this isn't about shame, it's about awareness. You don't have to end up as another paragraph in some federal write up. There is still time to pivot, still time to get help, to walk away before your story turns into one of these. If you're dealing with addiction, there are hotlines, rehabs, communities, resources, hit the descriptions, talk to someone, tell, part of what's on your mind. But, if you're a parent, talk to your kids about all this stuff. If you've already, caught charges, learn from it because you'll never win. And understand what exactly conspiracy means, what these statutes mean, so you don't let ignorance write your sentence. I'm Christian Whitlow, and this is Fed by Fire. From the streets to the studio, I'm here because I survived my own stupidity, my own pain, and a system that could have easily kept me locked up forever. I'm not better than anybody in these stories. I just got a second chance and decided, to do something different with it. Stay safe, stay smart, and don't let your name end up on one of these press releases. Everybody, have a good Sunday. I'll catch y'all on the next one.